Can I ask everyone to take seats for services, please? Excuse me, folks, could you take seats for services, please?
My sister's
If you're going to ask you to remain standing for just a moment, Rabbi's going to say the blessing and then prayer for us. It's wonderful.
It is called kura, which means to tear. And we would say that they would tear the ribbon, which is attached to the clothing, and see it as a piece of the clothing.
We just have a secret start to the service.
But we decided to knock off, and we're going to accept our Sabbath. So we said Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Dayan Ha'emet.
Rabbi calls those who are speaking on the other side of the menorah there. There's an open ranch to the Holy Spirit. Relatives and friends, as we begin our services today, we ask you to please turn off all cell phones or electronic devices or place them in a silent mode.
Tirachem al banim, Richam Adonai al Yireyav. As a parent has compassion for children, so God has compassion for all of us. God knows how we are fashioned. God understands that we are but dust. And yet Adonai's compassion is everlasting, and God's kindness to children's children goes on age after age, unchanging. We always begin our service with Psalms, the oldest prayers that we have, going back to the time of the Bible. And in that way, we're going to link the life of Erv Toll to 3,000 years of Jewish tradition, the people of Israel, and the eternity of God.
לעתים למות רגליך, ינום שומריך. הנה ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל. אדוני שומרך, אדוני צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם.
I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? With those questions, the psalm begins, and the rest of the psalm offers answer. The source of my help is the Lord, creator of heaven and earth. He will not let you falter. Your guardian does not slumber. Surely the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. He is at your right hand to protect you. The Lord, your keeper, gives shelter. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all harm, will guard your soul. He will guard your coming and going from this time forth and forever. Mizmor David, another of the Psalms of David. Adonai ro'i lo echsar, bino tedeshe yarbitzeni, amei menuchot yenahaleni, nafshi yeshovev. Yancheni v'maglei tzedek l'ma'an shemo, gam ki elech begetz al maved lo irara, ki ata imadi. Shiftecha mishantecha heme yanachamuni, taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai, dishanta v'shanu roshi kosi devaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirefuni kol yimei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. Those are the Hebrew words of Psalm 23, which we know so well from settings such as this. We sometimes call it the Shepherd Psalm. Many of you know it from memory. Recite with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. At this season of the year, we are counting the Omer, counting the 49 days from the second day of Passover to Shavuot, from the commemoration of the Exodus to the celebration of the giving of Torah at Sinai. For 7 weeks, we recite a blessing and we count the day, a ritual that truly suggests that we reflect on our daily blessings. Ervin passed away on the 18th day of the Omer. Just hearing that resounds in our ear. In Hebrew, it's rendered, that number 18 is rendered by the letters Chet and Yud, which together spell the word, Hebrew word, Chai, life. And thus it seems so very appropriate that we use this day to reflect upon the blessings in Erv's life. To do that, we're going to hear from the generations of family. We're going to begin with the grandchildren. Sasha will go first.
like it. Just yesterday we were here for my mom. It's so hard, when we were here last year, not only because we lost our mom, because we were really in the height of the pandemic, and we were completely unable to spend any time with her before she passed away. Well, it feels devastating to now lose Papa. At least I'm grateful that we've had many wonderful memories in the last year together. One of the first times we visited Papa after Mama passed away was in April, the weekend he moved into his new place. We went out into a restaurant in Morristown, and in Papa's fashion, like usual, he says I'm not that hungry. I split a cheeseburger with Papa. I was pregnant, so I could only eat a little bit at the time. And I ordered the girls short rib garganelli, but in Belle and Violet fashion, they barely touched it. I see Papa looking at the bowl, and I asked him if he'd like some. He said, sure. And Papa proceeded to finish the entire bowl of pasta. That was the thing about Papa. He always said he was only a little bit hungry, but if he loved something, he could really eat. In June, we came back again, and we visited Papa. And this time, we went to his place, and the girls were particularly rowdy. They were jumping all over the couch, and Papa looked a little nervous. So we put on Cocomelon, which is a terrible children's show with cartoons, so we didn't have a repeat Stefan incident with Belle or Violet diving into the glass table. So while I personally find Cocomelon intolerable, Papa sat there and watched baby cartoons with them, smiling the entire time. That's another thing about Papa. Everybody here knows that he was good-natured all of the time. And so, most recently, we saw Papa in March. And this time, Godfrey was smart and he moved the glass table away. So, while Belle and Violet were rolling on the floor, swimming, Papa sat on the couch, holding Jasper's finger, watching him and smiling. While Papa's recent health challenges have certainly made eating difficult mobility, and I know that he felt very lonely without Mom, I was so glad that we were there just to keep him company and to make him happy. And Papa, I will always miss your stories, spending time with you, and the way you used to call me and say, how you doing, sweetheart? And the way your face would light up when you would FaceTime with our kids or see them in person. I hope you're now with my mom, keeping her company. I love you.
Stefan?
Thank you all for coming. Nellie and Irv, to me and my brother, sister, cousins, Mama and Papa, they were, it's going to be tough, you have to bear with me, I'm sorry. They were world travelers. Through my mom's lectures and teachings, they went country to country, speaking to Jews, non-Jews, educating people young and old, telling them about the Holocaust and the struggles of our people. And they both loved culture in the world, and whenever I would go to visit another country, Papa would always have a story, some detailed recount of the people there, the culture, some distinct story. And so today, I'm going to borrow an anecdote from the Persian culture. A good friend of mine is Persian, and Mama and Papa, I know, spent a lot of time on that side of the world. In that culture, they say that you can tell a lot by a man the way that he passes. If it's peaceful and in his sleep, it means he had a long, happy life. And that he's moved on to the next place with his heart full and satisfied. And that is Papa Berv. We're here to really celebrate a life, 100 years. And in the drive up, I was talking to Antina about how lucky we were to have him for so long. Papa went through so many procedures in the hospital, and he came out fine every time. He, like Antina said in the car, it's like he had 20 lives. And we are so lucky to have experienced all 20 of those lives with Papa. And I'm thankful for each one. I truly, truly hope that there's a heaven, because I can just picture Mama greeting Papa with that big smile and those arms and her shuffle over to go grab him. They love each other so much, so much. I have so many pictures in my phone of them just standing, holding hands. And we used to say, Papa, give Mama a kiss. And they would give her a kiss at the dinner table, and it was magical, and we're so lucky to have seen all that and experienced all that. Papa had this way about him. His smile was like soft and comfortable, but so deep and masculine at the same time, and he was just such an incredible man. Papa and I would sit and talk for hours, and I would just get him to tell me war stories, and he would talk about Temple basketball and Rutgers, and then he would say to me, "Oh, you have any interesting cases?" And then I would tell him, and if there was a lot of money on the line, he would go, "Shoo." That's him. He was a storyteller through and through, and would always say, "I had a client who was in a similar position," and I love that. So Papa was a supply sergeant in the United States Army when he was over in Europe. And the supply sergeant is someone who, if you need shoes or if you need a new uniform or a weapon or something, you would go to the supply area and the supply sergeant would give it to you. And so as Papa would say, everybody wants to be friends with the supply sergeant. And that was Papa. Everyone wanted to be friends with him. I found a video from Thanksgiving in 2017. We have a cousin named Justin who lives in California. He has a girlfriend, no connection really to Papa. And I have this random video where she comes over and she says, "Irv, it's always so nice seeing you and speaking to you. Bless you and stay healthy." And he says, "Thank you. Thank you, sweetie, thank you." And that was Papa Berv. Everyone loved to speak to him. Everyone loved to be in his presence. And that's someone that I aspire to be as I get older. And so, Papa, we spent a lot of time together. Every time I eat chicken parm, I'll think of you. And every time I have a root beer, I'll think of you. I'll always do my best to make you proud. Tell my mom and my dad I say hi. And that I miss them every day. And here's to your life, Papa. I hope you're welcome into heaven with open arms. And maybe just a little chocolate ice cream. Thank you.
Alexi?
I think Sasha might have copied my speech a little bit. I don't know. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. It's hard to believe that I'm back on this podium in front of all of you today. Except this time, there's one less person in the room, and that's my birth. A dedicated grandfather, a loving father, and a selfless husband. And when I was thinking of what to talk about today, it was hard to separate Papa Burv being a grandfather, a father, and a husband. As many of you know, at a young age, my brother, sister, my mother, and myself lost my father, Barry, and I was 6. And at 6, you don't have many memories. But there are a series of memories that I have from those days, months, and years. And many of them are of my mom, Nellie, and Papa Burv. Papa Burv and my mom would get in their old silver Acura with those gray, smelly cloth seats and schlep all the way up from 504 T Rose Lane in Cherry Hill to Marlboro. About an hour and a half drive. They would pack all 3 of us in the car and immediately turn around and drive right back to Cherry Hill for a weekend of fun. It was on these return trips to Cherry Hill, Sasha, Stefan, and myself would be asking Papa what we could do that weekend. Naturally, my go-to ask was Chuck E. Cheese and Chinese food. And my mom sitting next to him didn't ask, she just told him, "We're going." Irv, we're going to Chuck E. Cheese, and then the Philadelphia Science Museum, and then over here, and then over there. And then Papa would go, "Okay, enough already, Nellie." But we still did all the events we wanted. We piled into that smelly car, and we still had a great weekend of fun. But going back to my earlier point, it was hard to separate the role of a grandfather, a father, and a husband. When my father passed, it was almost instinctual that Papa Burv could not let a weekend go by where he wasn't distracting us from reality. And while the 3 of us always thought it was about us, it was really more for my mother, Sharon, his daughter and his best friend. It was his support, his love, and his willingness to come every weekend and give her a break, or the satisfaction of her knowing that her children were having fun. It was him being the best father he could be. And lastly, the role of husband. If there's one thing everyone in this room knows, my mom did not let him off easy. He did everything for her, whether that was by force or by choice, that's a different story. This wouldn't be a speech about Pop-Up if I didn't bring up the fact that Pop-Up was over 100 years old. Stefan, Sasha, Danielle watching at home, and Josh. You know what that means? If you keep eating ice cream sundaes, Reese's peanut butter cups, and chocolate cake, you too can make it to 100. But even at 100, his mind was as sharp as 20. He knew when and where I was moving. He knew Sasha had babies and how many. He knew that one of my cousins on the Siegel side of the family had just finished college, and his memory was incredible. One day recently, I think around February, I flew into Newark Airport, and I wanted to surprise Pop-Up before I went back into the city. And like every other celebrity traveling during COVID, I had my joggers on, my comfy oversized sweater, black sunglasses, a hat, and a KN95 mask on. And the Uber dropped me off outside a little bit down the street from Pop-Up's. And I'm walking towards the front door, and I see a man in a wheelchair with a jacket on and a hat and a mask on, and I just walked by. And the man in the mask lifts up his finger and he goes, "Oh, that's Alexi." And the doctor goes, "No, Mr. Irv, that's not Alexi." And then I turned around and I looked back and it was Papa. And I was stunned, and one, I didn't recognize him, and how did he recognize me with all that arm? And no one could see who it was. It was crazy at 100. And I wanted to end on something that was not a story, but it was a dream. Sometime after Mum had passed, I had a dream where I was sitting with Mum, and she was all dressed up in a black gown with one of her brooches on and her hair and makeup done. And her and I were on a Zoom call, and we could see my mom and Papa in the Zoom. And my mom turned to me and she said, "Tell Irv it's time to come home. Tell Irv it's time to come home." In the dream, she did that nod that everyone knows. Well, Mom, your husband, your dedicated, loving husband of 60 years is coming home. I love you, Papa.
Josh?
Growing up with a grandfather is a blessing. Having a grandfather lived over 100 is special. Papa had numerous qualities that continue to inspire me, and I want to highlight a few. Papa was incredibly considerate. We all say how honest he was, which he was, but he wasn't honest to a fault. He never used his honesty to be disrespectful or overly critical. He never let his honesty trump his sensitivity. He was always focused on how other people felt and chose his words carefully. He didn't want to make anyone feel bad by saying the wrong thing. For example, if you asked him his favorite ice cream flavor, he didn't have an answer. "Papa, what's your favorite movie?" "I like them all, Josh." "Okay, fine. Well, what about your favorite musician?" "I just love music, Josh. I can't pick." At that time, I thought Papa was just indecisive. But in reality, he just didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Not that Frank Sinatra would ever know that Papa actually enjoyed Aretha Franklin better. But nevertheless, Papa refused to make a selection. He continually prioritized others over his own preferences. To showcase this even further, Papa never complained. I genuinely can't think of a time I heard Papa complain. And trust me, he should have. With Mom, he would always sacrifice his own desires to do what Mama wanted to do. If there was a certain food being served, he never gave bad feedback or asked for a substitute. Again, because he didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Papa was a gifted storyteller and masterful comedian. His memory was phenomenal, and when he narrated a story, it was as if you were there with him. The intricate details he shared would make one think that you were there with him, or that the specific events happened yesterday, when in fact they were decades earlier. Regardless of his age or health, Papa was always able to tell a joke or make a witty remark. His timing was flawless, and his delivery was perfect. No matter your age or the humor you were into, Papa's jokes always landed and everyone always laughed. What's most important was that Papa didn't live a life with regrets. I specifically asked him this big picture question a couple years ago, and he felt very fulfilled with how things turned out. He married the woman of his dreams and raised a family that now has 3 great-grandchildren and a 4th on the way. I love this quote that I think truly encapsulated Pop-Up's view on life. If all you did was just look for things to appreciate, you would live a joyously spectacular life. I'm so thankful to have such an amazing grandfather for such a long time. Pop-Up, I will miss you every day. Thank you.
Gail is going to speak for Danielle.
Thank you for coming. As many of you know, my daughter is in her 8th month of pregnancy, and the Jewish custom, or at least the Crichton family custom, is when you're carrying life, you cannot, unfortunately, be at other very important events. And so I will do my best to bring Danielle's words the depth and the love that she would have delivered. My Pop-Up was the exact role model every grandchild needs in their life. He was brutally honest, but never harsh. And he had such a deep, sensitive side that it was hard not to adore him. Like anyone, he had some days that were harder than others. But whenever he saw his grandkids and his great-grandkids, he lit up with a huge smile. Nothing was more satisfying than greeting Pop-Up and seeing his face illuminate with the most contagious smile. He had several expressions that he used to repeat on rewind, like, son of a gun, and you don't say. That would make me laugh, and he would let out a huge whistle when a story surprised him. He also had a skill in tuning out drama, like when Mama would give him a hard time, quite often. Pop-Up loved history, tennis, and the movies. I remember when I was younger, Mama insisted that we go to the Philly Art Museum. Pop-Up pleaded with her to stop by the Liberty Bell so he could explain to me the history of the landmark. He also enjoyed sharing his wisdom with me. He loved sharing history and serving in the American Army during World War II. I had heard so much of defeat and sorrow, in Mum's words as a survivor, that it was fascinating to hear his patriotic experience. He loved having a purpose and felt valued in the Army. I remember him telling me a specific story about a football bet that he engineered. He knew a lot about football, and there were 2 teams playing. One was the best in the league, and one the worst. However, his friends from other parts of the country really weren't that familiar with football, so making the bet was an easy win for Pop-Up. He said it was like taking candy from a baby. But after securing the win, he just couldn't take their money, and he continued to feel tremendous guilt for taking advantage of the situation. It was harmless fun, but that was just Pop-Up's personality. He had that deep sensitivity. I also remember the amazing trips we had to the beach and the time we spent at their house in Margate. He would take me to see Lucy, the famous white elephant, teach me to play rummy, and ride bikes on the boardwalk. Whenever I would sleep over in Cherry Hill, our go-to evening activity was spent at the movies. Mama would naturally fall asleep before it even started, but Pop-Up and I were always fully engaged. I loved debriefing him after and asking him to give me his best movie critique. When he moved to Voorhees, he joined a movie critic club, and he absolutely loved it. The only thing to top the charts for my Pop-Up was dessert. From an outsider's perspective, you would guess his favorite dessert was ice cream, but he claimed he had no favorites. If it had sugar, he was interested. I mentioned earlier that his grandkids made him smile, while dessert made him absolutely giddy. He would claim he was stuffed, as Sasha said, from his big dinner, but if you asked if he wanted a slice of cake, he would say, okay. Once the dessert was out, he also stopped contributing to dinner conversation. He only had eyes for the small treat in front of him and would savor every bite. My grandparents weren't exactly master chefs and did not have a stock fridge, but I always knew that there would be at least 2 pints of Breyer's ice cream in his freezer. Later in life, my mom would stock his freezer with a variety of flavors from Haagen-Dazs and Ben & Jerry's. Papa usually did not have a preference for ice cream brands, but once he tried those, he said, Danielle, I've now got premium ice cream. He loved my mom, but I think he particularly loved it when she came and resupplied his stock. Papa told me later in life that he actually loved to bake, a skill I was surprised to hear. He especially enjoyed making pineapple upside-down cake. The recipe was his Bible, And he told me that if there was ever a missing ingredient in his kitchen, he would not bake it. He couldn't experiment, and he would never use a substitute. It was far too risky. Hearing that story made me laugh because I'm just like him. I would never cook without following a recipe to a T. We both thrive with structure and direction. He told me he wished there was a baking club when he was in middle school, but instead he was in woodshop. He spent his whole semester building a sewing machine for his mom. He worked on it all year and was so excited to present it to her for Mother's Day. But when he came to school to pick it up, it was missing. He was so frustrated, and then he was shocked to see a fellow student walking around with his sewing machine. When I asked why he didn't tell the teacher that someone stole it, he said, "I would never get anyone into trouble." A perfect demonstration of the type of person my pop-up was. Above ice cream was Pop-Up's love for my mama. He may have tuned her out when she was hassling him, but he loved her endlessly. I remember one summer a few years ago, Mama and Pop-Up were in our backyard for a barbecue. We asked Pop-Up to tell us again how he met Mama. He said at the time he was seeing another girl, but when he met Mama, he knew she was dynamite, and she stole his heart. Conversation quickly turned back to Mama, as she always wanted to do the talking naturally. She wanted to talk about her trek to America and how the war ended. Mama was not one for telling numbers or for telling time, and the last boat departed to America without her. Pop-Up quickly chimes in. Ever hear the expression, missing the boat? He had us all hysterically laughing. He always had these amazing one-line singers to contribute. My Pop-Up had it all: sensitivity, warmth, and humor, and love. I was so lucky to have a grandfather as an adult. I learned so much from him and only hope I could be as good of a parent as he was a grandparent. Pop-Up, I love you and will miss you every day.
Sharon. Jeff first? Okay. Jeff.
Smart enough and old enough to know how lucky I am to have had my dad for so many years. How many children have a parent who's lived 100 years? How many of us even met 100-year-old? I had a special relationship with my dad. He really was a special person. My dad was my best friend. We were so close that many times my mom would be jealous. After law school, my father suggested a father-son trip to the United Kingdom. We planned a 2-week trip around the UK where my father would show me some of the places he was stationed while serving our country during World War II. My mother hated to be left out and said we could only go if she joined after 10 days. Of course, that's exactly what she did. She joined us. I saw the UK through my dad's eyes, a proud patriot who regaled with the details of his life in the Army. It was the first time I heard about the war from his perspective. I was incredibly proud of my dad. My dad, I think, was equally proud of me. When I needed a quiet place to prepare for the bar exam, I decided to return home to study. My dad and the count somehow convinced me to take the CPA exam also immediately after the bar. He volunteered to help me prepare, and boy, I needed the help. I asked him question after question. I haven't looked at accounting for 5 or 5 years, and I'm zero confident. My mom, the eternal optimist, to put me on a pedestal, would pop down to check on us and say, "Irv, Jeff really seems to know his stuff." My dad would laugh and say, "Nellie, we haven't covered the basics. He has no chance." When I told him I somehow passed, he had that expression, "Really? No kidding." Best friends know how to make each other laugh. To amuse my dad, I would frequently pick on my mom. He loved to be part of the prank. I would give him the heads up that I was going to call my mom in 5 minutes, pretending to be someone important, and he would answer the phone. My favorite time was when I pretended to be the captain of the cruise ship that they recently traveled on. Everyone who knows my mom always knew that somehow she would forget things. My mom always forgot at least 3 things on each trip that they took, and remarkably, somehow it was my father's fault. Understanding the setup of my prank, my dad answered, "Nellie, it's the cruise line, the captain is on the phone." I would disguise my voice, and I would say, "Is this Nellie Toll, the famous artist and author?" And my mother would say, "This is she." I would say, "Nellie, you left your wedding band on the cruise." She thanked me she thanked the captain for letting her know, and asked my father what address to send the ring to. My dad, I'd hang up, my dad would tell her at the end of the call, "Nellie, that wasn't the captain. Your ring is on your finger." And that was Jeffrey. My dad had a uncanny ability to put people at ease with his warm disposition. No matter what was going on or how difficult his day was, my dad always greeted you with his infectious $1 million smile. It was that smile. Boy, it's really what made it so incredibly proud. But I knew that it wasn't fun and games. All fun and games. My dad was a child with depression, served during wartime, and navigated several heart surgeries, cancer, and an essential tremor. The toughest blow was, of course, losing my mom unexpectedly. It's funny, he spent so much time worrying about leaving my mom alone first, that he was going to pass away, and to navigate life's complexities when he should pass. He never contemplated the reverse scenario. When he outlived her, he was totally adrift. And Dad, I really tried to make it bearable without Mom. These last 17 months, I moved my dad so he would be 5 minutes from my house. We spent so much time talking and looking at photos and watching old movies. The past month alone, he enjoyed Passover Seder with Gail, Danielle, Adam, and Josh flew in. I was really lucky this past Saturday. I sat outside, it was a beautiful day. I sat outside with him for an hour and a half, and we just talked and talked about anything and everything. He asked me how old I was. I told him, Dad, I'm close to 65. Again, it was that same 65. You look pretty good. Sat outside and talked. We covered my sister and her social life, the joy Sasha and Sam brought with Belle, Violet, and Jasper. Did I know if Stefan had a girlfriend? And when was Alexi getting engaged already? I was happy that he was looking forward and enjoying the evolution of his family. Dad, you built a deep and meaningful bond with Danielle, Josh, Gail, my sister, her kids. They adored you. You lived a long and incredible life. I was given a great gift having you as my father. Your profound influence on me will be forever. Dad, I love you, and I'll miss you every day.
Sharon.
Again, thank everybody for coming. You know, people came from far. It's really hard to sum up who my father was. He was a wonderful person and very unique. He was everything to me. He was my best friend, my shrink, and my crisis manager. He helped me for as long as I can remember, and he was always my rock. Every time I had a decision to make or a crisis about one of my kids, I would call him. He would talk me through it. And he was such a good guy. Like Jeff said, he went on a trip with him. I also had to fight to get him to go on a trip with me. And I found a trip that my mother had no interest in, so I was able to take him to Richmond, Virginia, to look at Civil War monuments. And the thing about my father is, he never expected anything from anyone. Throughout his life, at least when I was with him, he was always given so much love and praise from so many people. When I took him to Richmond, he was amazed at how many strangers went out of their way for him. People would tell him, you know, don't use that door, I'm going to show you a private entrance. The same thing happened when I took him to Devils games, which he absolutely loved. They really were so kind to him, and he was just constantly amazed that people really cared about him. But he had that wonderful smile, and he was so appreciative of the smallest things. I remember him telling me with so much surprise about when he was in Europe during the war, and he was on a train, and there was an old man on the train who was probably 40, but he was an old man to my father. And he spoke to him Yiddish, and he asked him if he was Jewish. My father said yes, and there went a beautiful relationship. My father started going to their house every Shabbos, and he had a lifelong relationship with that family. And I visited them 25 years ago. He had stories like that all the time. So, I'm not as organized as everybody else here, probably Mother, Nellie, and me. But I have to say that he was my strongest cheerleader. I could never do anything wrong. He was so kind to me. It's hard to understand such a level of kindness because it's so rare today. He was funny, and he took a script from Jeff's playbook, and I don't know if Sasha remembers, but he called up one day when we were a little girl and pretended that he was calling from the White House for Hillary Clinton. And you were so excited to talk to him on the phone. I never told you that it really wasn't the White House. He was so good to my kids. After I lost Barry, he was constantly there. He would call me after a day with Lexi and say, "Do you know how much a hockey stick costs?" Whatever they wanted, he would do for them. Even though he thought $200 for a hockey stick was insane, he would do it. He never really complained. He told me when Sasha and Stefan were visiting him before Alexei, and they were little kids, and his car ran out of gas. He had to walk 5 miles. He was afraid to leave both of them behind, so he carried a kid in each arm all the way to the gas station, got a can of gas, and walked back 5 miles carrying both kids. When Stefan dove into the glass table, it was brutal for him. And he talked about it for years and years. We're so happy that you survived with a few stitches. My memories of my father are like everywhere. I can look in my house, I can look at outside. I remember the first time I bought a new car that was a nice German car. And he kept worrying that I couldn't afford it. I'm sure he did that to you guys. Stephanie was worried you were spending too much money on cars too. He was always worried, and he was really, really good for me. You know, wonderful to me my whole life. I can't go through every story. I don't want everybody to fall asleep, but he became my mother's biggest supporter in life. She was very involved in the Holocaust. He never complained, going from city to city, airport to airport. And one time, when he really didn't want to go, I said, "Dad, just let her go by herself." He said, "Oh, she'll never make it out of the airport." And I said, "Dad, she has her PhD. She can find the baggage claim." He said, "No." And he really did love his grandchildren. He would always ask me questions, what they're doing in school, who they're meeting. Stefan, he does really like me to be a nice Jewish girl. He was devastated when my mother passed away. Different than he was devastated when Barry passed away, because then I think he spent the rest of his life worrying about me. But behind it all, he was very proud. He was very proud of you guys. And he had a lot of love. And I have to tell you, Tina, he loved going to your house on all the holidays. He felt so happy there. He smiled for 3 hours in a row. He didn't stop. You guys were really good to him. And to those Hellers, and Aaron and Amy and all those children, I heard more stories about you guys than I can remember. He was so happy with you. You were really great to him. Really, he was Uncle Irv, and you were wonderful to him. I'll always remember that. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Pammy, thank you. Nancy, we were so happy that we all started seeing each other again. We loved you guys. Thank you.
As we noted, we're counting the Omer, and each day that we count, for each day that we count, we recite a blessing. So many blessings in the days of Irv's very long life. And family was certainly the greatest of those as is so apparent from the words we've just heard. Let me add just a couple of more thoughts and underscore a bit. One blessing that we should not overlook is the blessing of having been born in this country. Irv's parents were from Russia. He was first generation to be born in the United States. And that was a blessing for all the days of his life and, of course, for all the generations to follow. And he was well aware of that. And perhaps that helps to understand why, when he finished high school and when World War II started, he was prepared to serve his country. After basic training, he was sent to England and served in a number of towns there in the UK as a supply sergeant, which we've learned. And after 9 months there, he was sent on to Paris, where he spent a similar amount of time. Each day when he was there, a list was posted, and if your name was on it, it meant that you were going to be sent to the front lines. Irv would always remember what it was like to live each day thinking that it might be your last. His name never appeared on that list. He was blessed, and he knew it. Still, there were times that he felt a bit guilty because Paris was, well, Paris. And for him, it was an adventure. He met many people, made friends. He connected with the Jewish community, as he had during basic training as well, in Mississippi. And his connection to Judaism was reinforced. Even in the midst of the war, there were days that he felt blessed. His experience is a marked counterpoint to Nellie's. Her days were very different and in many ways so much more difficult. She didn't come to this country until she was a teenager, and by then Irv had been at Temple on the GI Bill, studying accounting. A day that was a blessing in both of their lives was in 1953 at a Purim dance, which Irv had organized as president of a Jewish fraternity. Nellie asked to meet the person who had put it together and was introduced to Irv, who said that he was the president. She didn't believe him. She asked to see his ID. Irv told me that he knew that very night that he wanted to marry her. Her energy, her charisma were so apparent, not to mention the fact that she was attractive. The artwork he learned about later, the drive, her drive, only added to that. And they married in December of that same year, and they made a marriage of 67 years. Now, when a couple is married in Jewish tradition, on that day, we don't wish for them one blessing, we wish for them 7 blessings. But one we repeat twice. We pray that they will become Re'im Ahuvim, beloved companions. 67 years making a home, a life, 67 years of days raising children, seeing them married, enjoying grandchildren, encouraging and supporting each other day by day for 67 years. Re'im Ahuvim, beloved companions, blessing fulfilled. But Re'im Ahuvim does not mean that the beloved companions are the completely same personality. On the contrary, it's been noted that your parents' relationship could be characterized as compatible opposites. Irv was a numbers man, an accountant who went by the books. His nickname could have been Honest Abe. Nellie was, of course, honest and ethical as well, but she was an artistic personality, more free-form, laissez-faire, go with the flow. Irv was gentle. Nellie was much more driven. Irv was measured and reserved. Nellie was an extrovert and gregarious. They had a great partnership that brought blessing to all the days of both of their lives, all the days that they shared. It was Nellie who encouraged Irv to go out on his own as an accountant, and she helped him in that effort helped him to become successful by opening up the yellow pages and making calls to clients, potential clients. She was his PR department. And this despite the fact that you described your dad as the practical one and your mom as the artistic one. It's true that Irv took care of the family finances and he was better with the TV remotes and the phone. But part of his practicality was recognizing Nellie's talent and passion for learning. And it was Irv who encouraged her in her art and her writing, and he supported her through her bachelor's degree and then on to the PhD. She began that bachelor's degree when Sharon was at college and Jeff was finishing high school. So that support meant a great deal, and he was proud of her accomplishments. He was also, of course, supportive and with his children. We've heard warm, affectionate, caring. When you would go to him for advice, he would ask questions to help you clarify your own thinking and make your own decisions. He encouraged you both, Sharon and Jeff, to pursue your interests, introduced you, Jeff, to tennis, took you on that father-son trip to England. He encouraged your traveling as well, Sharon, and if you had questions about people you might be traveling with, he helped you make good choices. You said he made you feel safe. And he gave you both the space and the credit for your accomplishment, the space to have those accomplishments and the credit for them. He made his days a blessing in your lives. And he did that for Gail as well when she was a student at Penn and spent time with Nellie and Irv, and of course for the grandchildren, all of whom have made that very clear. Jeff, in our conversation, you said that your dad had the wisdom that comes with age, and his age, 100 years, was of biblical proportions, which brought to my mind the words of a psalmist who said, Limnot yamenu ken hoda v'navi levav chachma. Teach us to count our days, that we may acquire a heart of wisdom. Notice here that the psalmist associates wisdom not only with knowledge, not only with what you know, which is certainly the case that Irv acquired a lot of knowledge, but it also associates knowledge and wisdom with heart, a heart of wisdom. Irv put his heart first and foremost into family. Sharon, you said he was your rock, and he was also, you said, a rock, even going back to his younger days when he was a rock for his mother. And he was also there for cousins and nieces and nephews. Everybody could count on him. He made his days count. His heart of wisdom was a blessing to all of you. And there was room in his heart for others as well. One of the things that Irv and Nellie shared was their commitment to Yiddishkeit, and I got to know them through their involvement in Temple Beth Shalom, where they established a very close, or they had a very close relationship with Rabbi Lewis. And they attended services regularly, high holiday services for sure, other holidays as well, and they were frequently in the synagogue on Shabbat. They often contributed to our discussions of Torah, especially when it had to do with Israel, to which they had traveled and felt very strong ties, which is particularly noteworthy since today is Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day. Nellie was, of course, in these discussions much more outspoken than Irv. If she had an opinion, you knew it. She let you know it. Irv, on the other hand, would share his thoughts privately, usually in conversations after services. And perhaps because he was much less of a public persona, he followed up on all of this in a lovely way about 10 years ago. He invited me to lunch so that I might get to know him better personally. And we spent a couple of hours together that day. He shared some of those stories about his service during the war, his career, his interests, tennis, classical movies, Bridge Over the River Kwai was a favorite. He enjoyed the comedy of Alan Arkin, the acting of Charles Grodin. He also liked Larry David's shtick Erv also asked me about my interests and my background, and it was a wonderful conversation, a lovely, meaningful day. I only wish that I had been able to take notes, but it wouldn't have been appropriate. Still, the Talmud says, Divarim sheyotzim min halev nichnasim lalev. Words that come from the heart enter the heart. Erv had a heart of wisdom, and he knew how to make his days a blessing. I don't think we had dessert that day. I don't recall any ice cream. But when Erv was interviewed on his 100th birthday and they asked him the secret of his longevity, that's what he said: ice cream. Humor is also a part of Lavav Chachma. In the days since his 100th birthday, Erv remained a warm, gentle, kind-hearted man as ever, appreciative of every visit from the family and the help of his caregivers. Because of the way he lived his life, because of his heart of wisdom, and the way he made his days count, his memory will continue to be a blessing for all of you for all the days to come. Yehi Zichro Baruch. We rise for a final prayer. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace from your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Erv Tol, who has gone to his eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the kind, caring, and loving deeds that he performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of eternity with you, O Lord, as it is in the bond of memory with all who are here. You, O Lord, are his portion. May he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. You see this in a moment? We'll be traveling from here to Crescent Memorial Park for the burial. And then this evening, the family will be at Minyan by way of Zoom on the TBS website. And we'll invite those who want to remain after that Minyan to be with us for some additional Shiva stories and sharing. And then for further details about the continuation of Shiva, you can reach out to Gail.
And then we have the pallbearers, please. We would ask everyone to rise once more, please.
For everything there's a season for every experience under heaven, time to be born and a time to die, time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to tear down and a time to build up. Time to weep and a time to laugh, time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather, a time to embrace, a time to refrain. A time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to let go, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak.